Good morning. It's hard to believe that after all this time, I am actually back. There have been multiple technical difficulties, and if you could see me now, I've got my personal laptop. My mouse and my keyboard don't work, so I am winging it because I committed to myself and to you all that clearly aren't here watching that I was going to kick this back off today. So, welcome to the Vault podcast with myself, Nancy Giacalone. If we haven't met before, I have nearly 40 years of experience in the employee benefits industry. And for about 30 of those years, I owned my own agency as well. So when I say that I have a extreme depth of knowledge in the employee benefits area, I do. Not just in years, but in also the types of clients and cases I've worked on. And so this podcast is going to um, we're going to talk about the history of benefits, what it was like when I started in the mid 1980s compared to what it's like now. We're going to have guests on here, that have just entered the industry and those that have been in it as long, if not longer, than myself. So much has changed over the years, but the one thing that has not changed is at the core of what we do is we care for our clients. We care for our employers, we care for their employees, and we care for the family members that are provided insurance to. Things have changed. Policies look different. Costs certainly have changed. But again, it is really at that core. So let's hop in the Wayback Machine for a few minutes and talk about what it was like when I entered the insurance industry in 1986. Hate to admit that, but that is actually when I started. I started as an administrative assistant for a full lines insurance agency, and I was working with the life and health agent. He was a former New York life agent, and so his preference was to work on the life insurance part, and he gave me quite a bit of the work to do surrounding the health insurance. I found that I really liked it. Interesting side note, at the time that I started, there were no fax machines, there was no email, there certainly wasn't texting. So communication was a lot different. And at that point in time, we didn't even have a computer. So when I did a proposal or a comparison of benefits, I had to do it on a typewriter. I know it's terrifying, right? But that's the point that we were at back then. And the good part about that is you had to be super accurate because the last thing you wanted to do was have to do it over again. So I learned a lot through that method because if I did it and I gave it to the producer to review and he had corrections, what did I have to do? I had to do the whole thing over again. Now, fortunately, the computer came into our agency within a couple years of me starting there. And believe me, I was quite happy about that. But it was one computer for the entire office. And we each had our 3x5 floppy disk we could take in there and do some work. But I could put templates on there, I could create proposals, and that was a really big step forward. We also were really ahead of the times because we were one of the first agencies to get a fax machine. That really sped things up. We also had insurance couriers. So we had a courier that came to our office every day and picked up things that needed to go to the insurance company in a timely fashion. I really like the couriers. That's one thing I wouldn't mind bringing back again. But we did. They went around to you subscribed and they went around to all the insurance offices and they went to the insurance agencies. And so we exchanged a lot of information via courier. I'm trying to think. Probably about 10 years in is when we went with the whole agency was fully computerized and we were able to do things on personal computers at our desk. Now, mind you, again, if you think back, those were not small. They weren't extremely powerful. Whereas today, I could do a whole proposal on my phone if I wanted to. So technology has dramatically changed the way that we do business and the way that we communicate. I know a lot of my clients call me directly on my cell phone. I text with them. We always are trying to figure out what's the best way to reach people. And I think it's important to keep that in mind because we have to evolve. We have to stay current with the changing times and the changing ways that people want to receive information. If there's one thing that's been consistent throughout my career is I always think about if I'm producing a document that I'm either going to share with an employer or I'm going to give to an employee or a member, is it going to make sense to them? Are they going to understand it? Because it's really easy to get caught up in insurance ease and using a bunch of acronyms that only we understand and can appreciate. So back to those mid 1980s. Eventually, I went from being an administrative assistant to an actual producer. That was a little bit of a rocky transition for me, as when I went to the agency owner and told him my idea and why I thought I would be good at it, he just looked me dead in the eye and said, "I don't think you're going to be any good. Nobody really likes you." Well, challenge accepted, Dudley. I convinced him to give me a chance, although I did have to take a cut in pay and still do my regular job. And quite quickly, I was able to prove myself to him and to the rest of the agency. And I was given the opportunity to buy stock in that agency. I was there for about 10 years, and then they were going to merge with a larger agency, and it wasn't a good fit for me because they didn't think that it would be a good look to have a female producer, and instead suggested that I could run the girls in the agency. No thanks. And that's when I decided to start Olympic Crest Insurance. I had a really good run with Olympic Crest Insurance. I had it for just over 29 years. And then last July of 2024, I sold to Levitt Group Northwest, and I am still taking care of all of my clients as well as running their employee benefits practice. So it's been a big transition for me. I've learned a lot. It's hard not being your own boss. I'm not going to lie about that. But I work with some wonderful people that give me tremendous support. And I'm excited to see what I'm going to be able to do with this agency over the next couple of years. So, enough about me. Let's talk about insurance. Okay. Back in the 1980s, mid 1980s, was when PPO plans were introduced. Did you know that? So I remember sitting at a table when one of the local insurance companies rolled out their first PPO plan. And they were very excited about it because it was going to eliminate the need for members to submit claims. And we were going to have zero copays or $5 copays, and that was going to be the entire cost of the plan. And even as a young, fairly new agent, I knew that probably wasn't the best idea because we were going to disconnect people from the cost of insurance as well as the cost of healthcare. And that's when everything started to become muddied. And when we say medical insurance, health insurance, the first thing people think is it's the same thing as healthcare. And it's not. Health care is what you get when you go to the doctor, when you go to the hospital, when you get a lab or diagnostic procedure, when you fill a prescription. That's health care. Health insurance is the financing vehicle that helps pay for it all. So the more that is mandated to be covered under health insurance, the more health care services, you are also going to see a rise in the cost of health insurance premiums. And that's what's happened over the years. What do you think the average premium for an individual was in the mid 1980s? First group I ever sold. They had a comprehensive plan. I don't think they had any copays. Well, if anybody was actually on this live, I would hope that they would chime in, but let me fill you in. It's $35. $35 per employee per month for a comprehensive covered in full plan. Well, that sounds amazing, doesn't it? First year, what do you think happened to their renewal? It blew up. That was unsustainable. But again, insurance companies didn't really know how to price for this new model in the beginning. So we often had significant increases, annual increases. although that seems to have been forgotten over the years. The insurance industry is cyclical. So we'll always have this type of situation going on with our premiums. It's just going to be a fact. So we're going to have a couple of years of lower or flatter premiums, and then all of a sudden they're going to spike up again. 2026, if you're not preparing, I think it's not going to be a pretty year for most plans. I was looking at the Office of the Insurance Commissioner here in Washington State because all of the plans have filed for their individual and small group rates for 2026. Small group, we're probably looking at an average of a 12% rate increase that's been requested. Individual plans, upwards of mid-20s. That's not good for anybody. So we have to understand what's driving the cost of healthcare. We're going to dive into that later in the season. We're going to have some experts come on and talk about this. We're going to talk about the evolution of indemnity plans, where the insurance company paid you back for money that you spent, to PPO plans, where you had a network, a preferred network of doctors, HMO plans, which are health maintenance organizations, where you had a closed panel. You could only see those doctors. We'll talk about accountable care organizations or limited networks, where it's not quite as restrictive as an HMO, but you're seeing providers out in the community, but only within that particular circle. We're going to talk about direct contracting, where an employer makes a direct contract with a hospital or a provider for a agreed upon cost for a service, a package service. We're going to talk about reference-based pricing and what that means. We're going to talk about pharmacy benefit contracts and what a truly transparent contract looks like, and why it's important to understand what type of pharmacy contract is built into your plan. And all of the things. We'll talk about ICHRAs. See, we're an industry full of acronyms. An ICHRA is an individual coverage health reimbursement arrangement, and it allows an employer to provide a reimbursement for individuals purchasing coverage on the exchange. The individual loses the tax credit, but they are getting the money from the employer on a pre-tax basis. So we'll dive into that because there's a lot to learn about that. We're going to talk about COBRA. We're going to talk about health reimbursement accounts, flexible spending accounts, and all of the things that aren't talked about enough in our industry. We like to talk about the big flashy things, but sometimes what people really want to know is, can you just explain to me how an FSA works? That's a flexible savings account. Now, again, there's many variations of it. So we use these acronyms, and they are so broad in their definition that they are tossed around and they can be confusing. Another great example of that are HSA plans or accounts. HSA stands for Health Savings Account, and there's two parts to that. You have to have the qualified high deductible health plan, commonly known as an HSA plan. You'll see that out in the marketplace. And then you have your HSA bank account. You have to be enrolled in the qualified high deductible health plan in order to make or receive contributions to your HSA bank account, but you're not required to set up an HSA bank account if you're on an HDHP or high deductible health plan. So again, there's so many little idiosyncrasies. So we're going to dive into each of these topics in a lot greater depth. So next week, 2 weeks from now, we are going to start with the PPO and HMO plans. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to work our way through time a little bit. So we'll start adding in the different components as they were introduced to us. So we're going to get into transparency. We're going to get into compensation disclosures, but those things didn't happen until the last few years. So those will be more toward the end of the season. We're going to really start with the fundamentals because, quite frankly, there's a lot of people, hopefully not agents or producers out there, that don't understand what coinsurance is. That is probably one of the biggest questions I get when I'm doing employee meetings is it's very confusing to members. We take it for granted, but are you explaining it to the members in a way that they can understand and appreciate it? So that's what this podcast is going to be all about. If there's a topic you want to know more about, shoot me a message because that's the topic we want to discuss. If you think you'd be a great fit as a guest on this series, if you want to talk about, if you feel that you're an expert in a certain area, now it can't be a commercial, but if you feel that you have great information to share, I want to see you as a guest. So please let me know what's of interest to you because, oh, somebody loves our series. Yay. I'm happy. I'm happy about that. If there's something that's of interest to you, I want to talk about it. We'll learn together if I don't know the answers, but we need a forum to help not only experienced producers, but particularly new producers to our industry gain the foundational knowledge that will help them be successful in their careers and, more importantly, an asset to the employers and individuals they work with. So I challenge you to enter the vault with me every 2 weeks. Thanks for joining, and I look forward to doing more of these since I finally have it working again.